Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily Nostroza. How are you guys doing? So in today's video, I'm going to be continuing with part 2 of the 4-part series on how to become a consultant. And if you guys haven't seen part 1, I'll be sure to put the link up here. And in that video, I was sharing 5 steps on things to do before the recruiting season actually begins. And in today's video on part 2, I'm going to be sharing tips on how to start preparing for the case interview. For those of you guys who are new here, my channel is all about post-grad life and college advice. So if any of those topics interest you, make sure to click that subscribe button and also hit that bell button so you can receive notifications next time I post a new video. Alright, so let's dive right into today's topic of tips on how to start preparing for the case interview. And I know that in the consulting recruiting process, it can get very competitive and very intimidating because there are so many things that you have to do. And the case interview is not an easy interview. And I know that as I was preparing for my case interview, it was just a really hard time because I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what my first steps should be. All I knew was that I had to be prepared to go in and tackle this case interview. So if you haven't started studying for the case interview at all, and if you are completely new to the consulting recruiting process, then this video is perfect for you. Alright, so let's jump right in with tip number 1, and that is to first understand the different types of consulting. So as you start preparing for the case interview, you first need to understand what type of consulting you are applying to. Are you applying to strategy, technology, HR, or some other type of consulting? Because depending on what type of consulting practice you are applying to, it will ultimately determine what your case interview is going to look like and what you need to study for. So do research and figure out what type of consulting you want to pursue and why. If you know that you want to recruit with the big 3, which is McKinsey, Bain, and BCG, then I can for sure tell you that that consulting case interview is going to be a strategy case. But if you are applying for the big 4, which would be Deloitte, PwC, EY, and KPMG, as well as Accenture, then that case interview will depend on which practice you are applying to. So figure out what consulting practice you are applying to, and then that will help you figure out how to start preparing for the case interview. So tip number 2 is to read a book on the consulting case interview. So there are 2 really popular books on this topic. The first is Case in Point by Mark Cosentino, and then the second is Case Interview Secrets by Victor Chang. And so these books are really good and really helpful for understanding what the case interview is going to look like, what type of questions they are going to ask, what the interviewer is looking for, and then tips on how to ace the case. I will note that these books mainly focus on big 3 and strategy consulting, but if you are applying to any other type of consulting, I would recommend only reading the beginning of the book or only select chapters that share tips on how to succeed in the case interview. Tip number 3 is to begin reading the newspaper. So you want to read up on the news to familiarize yourself with what is going on in current events and within the industries. As you're recruiting, some of the candid conversations that you will have with professionals may revolve around current events, so you just want to make sure that you are in the know. But overall, reading about business and tech news is just a really good way to learn about real-world cases. There are always M&A transactions happening, companies deploying new technologies, and reading the news is also just a good way to learn about an industry that may be on a case interview. Tip number 4 is to learn the terminology. So you want to become familiar with the buzzwords that are used in consulting or that are specific to the consulting practice that you are applying to. So if you're applying to strategy, some of the terms you want to begin learning are like MISI, which stands for mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, or market sizing, benchmarking, and just like these other terms that you don't necessarily use in your everyday language. You also want to learn concepts that are used for financial analysis, such as the break-even analysis, ROI, which is return on investment, lifetime customer value, product life cycle, or financial statements. For technology consulting, you want to familiarize yourself with the tech buzzwords such as CRM, ERPs, blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT, and so much more. So make sure to do your research on the terminology and buzzwords just so you don't get caught off guard when you hear the term, and so you can also use the term and sound like an actual professional or consultant that knows what they're talking about. Tip number 5 is to start studying the frameworks. So if you're preparing for the strategy case interview, be aware that there are many different types of business cases that you will be faced with, and it is suggested to study and familiarize yourself with the frameworks, the business concepts, the financial formulas, as well as practicing math problems to improve your mental math because the cases will be very quantitative. So some of the the frameworks that you may want to start researching or learning about include profitability, the 3 C's, the 4 P's, market entry, mergers and acquisitions, Porter's 5 forces, pestle, pricing, value chain, or SWOT. There are just so many different types of frameworks, so do your best to study them, be aware of them, and know when to apply them. For strategy consulting, you will also have to be aware of business concepts. So during the interview, you have to constantly think business. Think, so what? So let's just say profitability has gone down and revenues are declining. But so what? What does this mean? What's going on in the industry? Are consumers' tastes changing? Is there something wrong with the company? Did the management change? You really have to think business-like and try to understand the problem and the different factors that could be leading to this issue. In the business case, it's also really important to be able to connect the dots, to draw insights, understand the interrelationships between players and industries, and how it affects the business and the decisions that they make. So reading and watching business news will really help you to think business-like and help you understand the environment and how that affects companies and industries. So during the case interview, you want to do your best to understand the different factors, and that will ultimately help you to connect the dots, see the bigger picture, demonstrate your business understanding, and overall provide a solid recommendation. For strategy, you're also going to have to be aware of financial formulas, such as revenue, costs, profits, return on investment, break-even analysis, and so much more. On the other hand, if you are studying for the technology case interview, there are mainly 2 or 3 frameworks that you will need to be aware of, and these were the 2 or 3 frameworks that I studied during my interview process. And you will need to understand some business concepts, but you won't need to know any financial formulas. So some of the frameworks or structures that you will need to know are the SDLC model, which stands for System or Software Development Lifecycle. Another framework to kind of think about is Company, People, Process, Technology. And then the third framework is the Project Management Triple Constraint. As for business concepts, some of the things that you want to keep in mind are change management, sustainability, timelines, and understanding the different types of companies and organizations and what type of technology deployment would be best for them. So depending on which type of consulting case interview you will be faced with, you definitely want to begin studying these frameworks, these concepts, and these formulas. So tip number 6 is to find business cases. So obviously, to start practicing for the case interview, you definitely need to have some business cases in hand. And you can find cases from the consulting firm's website, or just by Googling and trying to find some on a consulting prep website. You can also try asking around at your business school, or if any organizations have a case book, or you can also try asking friends who interned or who are working in consulting. My advice would be to read through 1 or 2 solved case interviews just to get an idea of how it works, what kind of questions they ask and what type of responses they're looking for. But then don't read any more than that. Just read 1 or 2 and then use the rest for practicing for the case interview. Tip number 7 is to watch a live case interview. So in my recruiting process, I know that before I actually started casing with another person, I actually sat down and watched some friends conduct a case interview just because I had no idea what it would look like, and I just wanted to see it in action before actually doing one myself. Oftentimes, jumping right into a case interview can be a little bit intimidating or scary because you don't know what to say, you don't know where to ask, or you kind of just freeze. So I think watching somebody do it is kind of like a good way to kind of smooth yourself into the case prep. Tip number 8 is to find a friend or mentor to case with. So you want to run through as many cases as you can with classmates, friends, or mentors who actually have some consulting experience through either an internship or a full-time job. Finding a person who has actual consulting experience will be much more beneficial for you because they will provide you with more specific feedback on how to improve your approach, and they've also obviously been through the process. They have the job or they've been through the interview, so they have more real-world experience and can provide you with better advice. I also suggest that you don't practice with an employee of a target consulting firm unless you already have some casing experience and already have an approach to tackling the case interview. And if you are going to take the time to meet with an employee of a consulting firm, you want to make sure that you don't waste your time, and you also want to make sure that you are ready, that you show that you studied, you prepared, and that you are going to make a good impression and be able to tackle that case interview. Alright, and lastly, tip number 9 is to practice and have fun. So when it comes to the case interview, you just have to practice, and practice. The case interview is not easy, but you will definitely get better with more practice. If you already know that you want to recruit and pursue consulting, get started with practicing cases as early as you can. You want to make sure that you develop an approach or a technique for tackling that case interview, and when the interview does actually come around, round, you'll be ready to nail it. And although you should practice a substantial amount, you also want to make sure that you do not over practice. So you'll know when you're over practicing when you start to feel like you're mentally burning out, or when you start going straight to a framework, or thinking of a past case without thinking critically and independently about the case at hand. Over practicing can also lead to conflicting feedback, because when you practice with multiple people, everyone will have different advice to give, and sometimes that advice can get confusing and have a negative impact on you. So practice as much as you can, but also make sure that you don't over practice. And then as you're preparing for the consulting case interview, remember to have fun. Case interviews are basically like a puzzle that you are trying to solve, and consulting is all about problem solving. So try to enjoy this process, work hard, have fun, be confident, and go out there and kill it. Alright, so that is all that I have in how to start preparing for the case interview. I hope you guys enjoyed part 2 of this How to Become a Consultant series. If you guys have any questions or comments, make sure to leave them in the comment section below. If you guys enjoyed this video and are enjoying this series, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. And as I mentioned, this is a 4-part series, so if you guys are excited for part 3, and if you guys want to watch more videos revolving around my post-grad life and any college advice, then make sure to click that subscribe button and also hit that bell button so you can receive notifications next time I post a new video. I'll see you guys in my next video. Thank you guys for watching.